Hello, and welcome to Social Studies Teachers Have Issues. I'm Dr. Heather Ballinger.
And I'm Dr. Kyle Ward.
The main objective for this webcast series is to try and help social studies teachers who are stretched too thin, both financially and with the amount of time they can put into prepping for their classes. This lack of time and money often hurts teachers when it comes to vetting some of the better teaching resources that are already out there.
To do this, we are interviewing education experts from a series of museums, institutions, and libraries. Interesting enough, many of these organizations suffer from the same issue of not having enough time or money to reach out to teachers across the country. They often have to rely on social studies teachers stumbling across their website or one of their professional development opportunities to learn what resources they actually have.
With that in mind, the issue we're going to deal with today is how to teach about how working class tenement residents who moved to the US from other countries helped build this nation. In order to learn more about this subject and how to teach about it, we'll be interviewing Stephen McIntosh, the Chief Officer for Education, and Maeve Montalvo, the Vice President of School and Teacher Programs from the New York Tenement Museum. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you both very much for coming in here. First question I kind of want to get started with is like, how did you end up working at the Tenement Museum? Was there a college background? Did you get into education? Was it history? Was it museum work? What exactly was the path that took you from where you were to how you got to this position at the Tenement Museum? Stephen, if you don't mind, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. Interesting journey. I actually had never myself professionally considered working in a museum before the Tenement Museum. My background's in primarily performing arts institutions, running education programs in theaters, working with teaching artists, creating experiences for young people, both at our venue and then bringing artists into the classroom for workshops or residencies. So I think it speaks to the uniqueness of the Tenement Museum, because yeah, my sort of stereotypical interpretation of museums, and I love museums, more individual experiences, engaging amazing artifacts from around the world. Love and appreciate and respect those who work in those settings. Yeah, my first experience here at the Tenement Museum, there's a familiarity that surprised me. Our educator-led tours felt more similar to immersive theater experiences to me. We've got reproduced apartments that reminded me of sets, and these sort of magical moments that were happening with visitors, very much like sitting in a theater or a dance performance or listening to music with others. So for me, I think my sort of professional expertise and background, yeah, largely working with a large ensemble of teaching artists, really melded well with, overseeing the 60 plus educators that we work with, cultivate and train to make these experiences possible. So yeah, it's a very unique museum, but a great fit for someone like me who largely came from arts centered education work, and now getting to be part of the amazing team here.
So, Stephen, kind of an odd follow-up, but were you working like on Broadway with different plays and stuff like that? What's the theatrical part here?
So I was trained as an actor. So I got a BA in drama, worked in like youth development, arts related fields, mostly in the out of school area, in Boston primarily. I came to New York City to do master's work at NYU in their Steinhardt School for Education. I got a degree in educational theater. Worked for a number of years, both as a teaching artist in the city. So got a lot of my sort of front facing experience and then directing education programs, first at a small nonprofit, Flushing Town Hall, Flushing Council on Culture and the Arts, then to sort of producing, running an off-Broadway theater housed in the West Side YMCA on the Upper West Side in a portfolio of community arts programs. And then lastly, was at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, running their education and family programs there.
Okay. Heather, we haven't heard that story before. This is the first for us at this point in
Oh,
time. So that's really cool.
great.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, we're always kind of
We'll
interested
insert some tableaus as we go along here and just try to
Maeve, how about you? Do you have a theatrical background, or was it education, history? What brought you into working at the Tenement Museum?
Yes, my background is in museum education specifically. And so I have a master's in museum education. And I got to this in a roundabout way because I didn't even know that museum education was a profession that one could be in. I'd always loved going to museums. I grew up in a family where museums were one of the things that we did. So I'd always been familiar with them. And then once I got to high school and then college, I did internships in museums, but I was always in the back end. I was always in the research arm or in archives. And I enjoyed being in the institution, but I really felt actually kind of just lonely in the back of the buildings a lot of the times, alone with the objects. So I didn't think that museum work was actually going to be for me. And through a very roundabout way, I ended up getting a summer job after college, very part-time as a farmhand at a historic museum. So one of the museums where you dress up in costume, and I had a lot of chickens and cows and sheep and other animals to take care of while dressed in period attire from the year 1750. And that was my first entry into engaging directly with the public in a museum sphere. And so from there, I have gone on to work in numerous historic house museums, and like Stephen, I also really enjoy the immersive aspect of them. So, the fact that you are walking into a physical place that's been recreated or reimagined to look like the past. And so, while I have worked in both art museums and history museums and also historic spaces really are where I think the magic can happen of walking in and just feeling like you're stepping into a past time. So I've been at the Tenement Museum for a little under a year now, but really hit the ground running. It's an incredible education team. And so my purview is working on school and teacher programs specifically here at the Tenement Museum.
Oh, that's really great. And for anybody listening on your bingo card, that's theater, education, chicken, and sheep. These three things that no one has said so far in any of our interviews. So that's fantastic. And
Mhm.
before I pass it to Heather, Maeve and Stephen, Maeve first. Undergraduate, where'd you get your college degree at?
Mm. So I did my undergraduate work at Smith College in Massachusetts and studied American Studies and art history. And I am a native of the Bronx in New York City.
Okay. Stephen, I heard NYU mentioned. Was there something before NYU?
Yeah, so true confession, I'm Canadian. So I'm an immigrant myself, immigrated 21 years ago to this country. So yeah, I don't know if folks would recognize Mount Royal University in Calgary, Alberta, where I got my certificate in performance theater and then got my BA in drama at Trinity Western University in British Columbia.
Fantastic. Before I give it to Heather, Mount Royal is the end of the bingo card. That should pretty much take care of everything that we hadn't prepared to talk on it here. So, Heather, what you got for me?
I love it. So you both work at the Tenement Museum. Can you explain what the main function of the museum is, how it got started? Just tell us a little bit about your institution and why it exists and why we should be interested in learning more about it.
Sure. Stephen, do you want to start off there?
Yes. Yeah, so our museum, I mean, is a younger museum. So our museum was founded, our two founders, Ruth Abram and Anita Jacobson, founded this museum in late 1980s, which really came about, yeah, a mission around recognizing that the history of New York City and the history of this country, a lot of that was focused on the rich, the wealthy, those whose names are, yeah, on buildings and placards and currently in books. And yet we know that so much of our history here in this country, in the city, was through the stories and the immigrant families. Their focus was on the Lower East Side and an interest in telling stories from the tenement dwellings or these periods of history of where these buildings played an important role. So yeah, it was actually kind of a magical moment as they were looking for space to be able to provide sort of a physical spot to engage visitors and engage, being able to tell these stories and revisit this history, complexify it. The very space that they were planning to rent out, this lower commercial area, that was up for rent in the 80s at 97 Orchard Street, they realized there was more above them, and the owner at the time allowed them to take a look around. And they found that the spaces above were like a preserved time capsule because of the changes in housing law. Essentially, the owner at the time in the 1930s evicted the residents rather than getting the building up to code. And so in everyone's departure, everything pretty much stayed as it was from the 1930s through the 1980s, untouched by, redevelopment, renovation works, a lot of things that happened to the buildings in the area at the time over the years. So, yeah, so that made our founders realize there was more to this space, that could help provide a location to engage visitors in this history, and really that was the birth of our museum and the start of the development of the tours that we now have today.
Mhm. So the building that Stephen is talking about, the Tenement Museum, we are 2 tenements now. So in the background behind me, on my screen here, these are the tenements. So we own 2 tenement buildings, and tenements are, apartment buildings in Lower Manhattan, and in each of these buildings, we have reconstructed some of the spaces to be apartments of recreations of apartments of real families that lived in these buildings. And so we have some of the rooms that have been recreated into these time capsules, and then some of the rooms, some of the apartments have been left as they were when the founders of the museum found them, so that visitors can really see the process of discovery, like 22 layers of wallpaper and just all the different artifacts that we've found over the years hidden behind baseboards or in closets or whatnot. We tell the stories of real families. And so there are 12 different families that we have extensively researched. Again, all families who lived in these buildings. And they are all families who immigrated or migrated to New York City and made a home for themselves here on the Lower East Side. And so through their stories, we can dive deep into this microcosm of American history, but as we talk about them collectively and really see how each family, each individual is responding to the larger societal forces at the time, we can overall get a sense of what American history is writ large by putting these different stories together. So when visitors come, they come on a tour experience, and this is one really important thing that we wanted to share about our museum is that it is a museum that is a human museum, not only in the fact that all of our content is about real people, but also that our system, our methodology is all through human interaction in terms of how you engage with the museum. So when you come to the Tenement Museum, the only way you go through it is on an experience with one of our educators who are deeply, deeply trained. And so in these small groups, you walk through, and we have this experience every single day where strangers who have happened to be on a tour together, by the end of the tour experience, are sharing their own stories with one another of their family history and grappling with what they're learning about American history. So it really is an experience where dialogue is preeminent, and we bring that to our programs for students and to our workshops and materials for teachers as well.
Great, thank you. That was a great overview, and I feel like I understand a little bit more about the important work that you both do. I'm wondering what day to day, what is the Stephen, what is the chief officer for education? What do you do every day to help support these tours and the tenement museum sort of work?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a privilege to have this role. So I talk about the 5 pillars of our department. We're the largest department at the museum. Um, the kind of key areas of what we do. So Maeve here leading our student teacher programs. Because of the complexity of our particular operation, and to Maeve's point, the scheduling of these educators and tours on the half hour, we have our own sort of education operations component of our department. We have training and resources, so we're doing all the training for all of these educators from the very start at our museum to ongoing tour learning, as well as scholarly work or advances evolution in sort of what we're learning about the families as we go. Um, Programming and interpretation is led by a VP in our department with in collaboration with our president is the creation of all the public programming, scholar engagement, new tours, ways that we're continuing to engage visitors as well as welcome in new visitors to the museum. And then lastly, curatorial department, which has been recently grafted into our work. The staff are overseeing the maintenance, the sustaining work around our objects in these spaces. Um, I'm learning a lot actually of trying to find the right balance between preservation, making sure that we're not doing things to disrupt or degrade these important objects and spaces, but also maximize engagement. Trying to get our visitors as immersed or close into these spaces and objects as possible. So yeah, I have a phenomenal leadership team that oversee each of those areas. So really, my work is alignment around the priorities and goals of all of those areas. How do they all work together? How are we moving together as a department to accomplish all of that? How are each of those areas receiving from one another? What they need to ultimately leading to the highest level of visitor impact. And we also call like the visitor pathway experience, of which we take a chunk. Another aspect of my work is all the interdepartmental collaboration with leaders in other departments, whether that's working with our visitor engagement team and their portions of the visitor pathway experience, how we're mutually supporting one another's work, working with our development team around all the amazing fundraising and grants that we're applying for to help underwrite, support our work, particularly underwrite our work for K-12 audiences and subsidize or even make our programs free and available in that way. Yeah, and working with our executive team is another big part of my role, making sure that we're aligned around strategic planning, sort of our larger missional priorities and supporting our president in that work, advancing the goals of the institution as a whole, budgeting. So all this equals a lot of meetings. A lot of my day is getting to have great conversations with all these wonderful folks, solving problems, coming up with new ideas, and making the magic happen.
So it's basically like one long performance. So I'm understanding the theater connection here and how these
Yep.
skills are translating for you. So that's great
Yeah.
to hear.
Yeah.
How about you, Maeve? What's day to day the vice president of school and teacher programs doing?
Yeah, so on a day-to-day basis, one of the things I love about museum work in general, but then specifically here at the Tenement Museum, is that every day can be different. So I'll give, uh, like Stephen, I'll share some like broad categories, but on a typical day, because we are working with so many visitors, you literally never know what's going to happen. So part of it is just being flexible and being ready to uh, go greet a group that needs a leader or go have a conversation over here that you weren't expecting to have. So that's part of what I do. But in terms of my role as vice president of school and teacher programs, one of the main things that I do is, and one of the things that we're working on now is really trying to set up a very strong foundation for the work that we do with K through 12 students and then with educators, and not just in New York City, where we are physically located as a museum, but nationally. With the Tenement Museum, we do a lot of work virtually. We even do virtual field trips. And we have a very wide network of teachers that we work with across the nation. And so I spend a lot of time engaging with teachers and running workshops, either in person or online for educators. And then another really fun part of my job is getting to work with the team here, the education staff here, to think about our trips, our field trips and experiences for students, and thinking about how can we shape the experiences so that the students walk in and it's, yes, a really cool old space and they want to know all about it, and then really like latching onto that curiosity to help them understand and have conversations about, again, some of the larger topics that are happening that these families are dealing with, such as changes in immigration law or the Civil War or other of these like touch points in American history. And then lastly, something that we are working on right now is also thinking about how to serve students who are multilingual learners or newer arrivals. And so we are piloting some programs right now that we're calling shared journeys, which are really, again, dialogue based experiences and experiential experiences, experiences where they walk into these apartments from the past, but where we are working with the young people to help them find connections between the lives of immigrants past and present and put their own family stories, put their own personal stories and journeys into this larger context and see how they are part of a larger whole here in the narrative of the United States.
That's great. I was curious about projects that are upcoming, and it sounds like I can see, really obvious connections between um, current events, but also like the mission of the museum to sort of be discussing, we've talked with a lot of organizations that, we're at the 250th anniversary of America and sort of thinking about like what that means. Sounds like you all have honed in sort of being like a nation of immigrants and the stories that we similarities, differences that we might share. Any other projects that you wanted to highlight that you all are working on that are relevant to your work right now?
Yeah, one really exciting project that we're working on is our Teacher Institute. So we run an annual Summer Teacher Institute. So for any educators listening or watching, encourage you to sign up for our newsletter and you'll be find out when applications open. And this is a program that we run each summer for teachers, and it's for nationwide teachers. And we pay you some money so that you can come here to New York City and spend a week with us, and it really is an incredible experience. So it's about 30 teachers or so in a session. And for that week, we are immersed in this together. And not only are the teachers going through the Tenement Museum themselves and seeing the apartments and hearing the family stories and then sharing their own stories, but we also have the privilege of working with an incredible lineup of guest speakers and scholars. And so these are folks who are at the preeminent are preeminent in their field. They are really at the forefront of thinking about scholarship and how are we thinking about public history and how are we thinking about how we teach the humanities. And they have devoted their lives to studying the primary sources and coming up with um, these broader understandings of how our country has been shaped by immigrants, migrants, and refugees over all of these years. And so those scholars, we work with them at the Tenement Museum. We work frequently with scholars and researchers. And so bringing them directly to the teachers is one of my favorite things because a scholar can be doing research, they can be writing a book, they can do public talks, but the amount of time usually between when research is unearthed, when they are coming up with these conclusions, and then the time that it takes to get to educators in the classroom or into a textbook, that can be a decade or more. And so one of the magical things that we do is we completely close that gap. And so the teachers who are working with us in the Summer Institute, as well as any of our professional learning workshops that we run throughout the year for educators, both virtually and on site, we are putting them directly in conversation with leading scholars. And so they are then able to take that thinking and also the new resources and primary sources that are being unearthed about people, for the large part, whose histories have not been focused on in textbooks or other resources. They're able to take all of that right back to their students, and then their students get to also be right at the forefront of history.
And Heather, if I heard Stephen right, he got into this field the same reason you and I did, most teachers did, for committee work. As much committee work as you can do, always very important for any institution or any school, I think. So, um,
Exactly.
Maeve, I'm going to go to you on this one because you just were kind of touching on it already. But Maeve, I'm a new middle school, high school history teacher in the Midwest. I don't live in New York. I'm out in the California or Washington State, something like that. So why I didn't take any classes or tenement history when I was in college. Why should I take time out of my schedule to teach my students about the tenement, what the Tenement Museum is doing?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, congratulations on your new role and welcome into the universe. Um, I love this question because it's true. As an educator in K-12, you have a lot of choices to make all of the time, and there's never enough time to make them. And one of the things that I really believe in the work that we do here is that by diving deep into the individual family stories that we share here at the Tenement Museum, what you are helping your students to learn is how to do historical thinking, how to think critically about how these larger forces are really shaping everyday people's lives, and also seeing how everyday, ordinary people are making change and are making choices based on what is going on around them. Our ultimate goal in all of our programs, whether it's for young students, to college students, to teachers, to general visitors, is that folks come away really understanding and believing that their story matters, that their personal story and their family story is American history. American history is the collection of all of our stories. And so we can really help you as an educator to help your students realize that. And it's a really amazing every single time we see that light bulb of empathy and then realization come alive in students' eyes, that sense of, "Oh, wait, my family's story, that is also important. That's just as important as anything else you might be learning about in social studies." So, because we are putting on a pedestal these ordinary everyday families who we were working class families in the tenements, because we are holding them up to the light like this, it is a way for everyone to see that their family history is just as worthwhile of being showcased as American history.
I'm sold. You convinced me. That's great.
Thank you.
Stephen, anything else you want to add to that same kind of question here? Is there anything that you're from your perspective?
After Maeve's beautiful response, I think the only thing that I would add, and I know we'll get into activities and specifics of how we do this or what we can offer teachers, but I think just adding to it helps, our belief that we want students to recognize the importance of that in their peers and those that they're in community with, both in the classroom and outside. So, really, this is also laying that groundwork for not just how you look at history different, but how do you look at each other differently, and those that you share space with, to celebrate differences, but also recognize some commonalities. And we find in our work, you know, what is it? Henry Nouwen talks about, what is most human is most universal. So, in the sense that the more that we can provide these spaces for, yeah, and it takes vulnerability, it takes some positive risk in the classroom. To Maeve's point, the sort of aha moments that individual students can have, a big part of that is seeing, the power of a story from a peer, and conversations we have of like, wow, I didn't know that we had a similar tradition like that, or I didn't know, Jose celebrates the same sort of holiday that I do, or that there's a different holiday at this time of year than the holiday we celebrate. So I think part of that too is just how this work also helps to create community, where community can be very difficult and challenging, particularly in a classroom environment. I think as well, we as a museum are committed to get into that difficult work with teachers as well.
Okay. You both have had the opportunity to tell people that you meet what you do for a living. You've had people who showed up to the museum, you've talked to teachers and stuff like that. Are there any misconceptions? Are there things that you just hear over and over again that people just don't understand about the museum? Maybe can I start with you?
Sure. Yes, there is a very large misconception about the Tenement Museum, which is that we only focus on the history of people right around like the industrial age, the sort of Ellis Island age, like 1880s, 1920s age, which we absolutely do talk about families and history in that time. But I'd love to bring up on the screen a timeline that shows what we do cover and the families that we cover, because it really is so much more extensive than that. So, the Tenement Museum, our mission is that we're welcoming you into the homes of immigrants, migrants, and refugees. And on the left here is a timeline and then all the last names of the families that we cover. And so, what you can see is that we really cover over 100 years. We're basically almost at 120 years of the span of American history, starting with a German family, the Schneiders, in the 1860s, going all the way to a Chinese family, the Wongs, in the 1970s. And so this is the misconception about the time period that we cover. This is something that I love to be able to share with educators, that whatever you're teaching, if it's post 1850, there's a place for it here, and the work that we do and the resources that we have can support you. And I think that this is also really important, that we are thinking about immigration and migration at all these different moments, and always, of course, connecting it also to today and seeing how changing immigration laws, seeing how changing roles of family members, seeing how labor and industrialization, all of these things, we get to see how that is changing the landscape for immigrants and migrants and refugees, and again, the choices that they have to make. And so this is definitely something that I'm always excited to share when people say, "Oh, you work at the Tenement Museum. Is that about like folks in the garment industry? Or, is that about like, oh, like old-fashioned history?" And I'm like, yes. And also the Saez Velez family, a Puerto Rican family who came in the 1940s and 50s, just like my own family did. So there's a lot of recent connections and history as well that we get to talk about.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the stereotype I had in my head too was like Eastern European moving in
Mhm.
during the Ellis Island era here. Stephen,
Exactly.
how about you? Are you dealing with any misconceptions out there that people have?
Mine were, yeah, maybe a little more general, or visitors. There's a misconception that we're not a nonprofit, that we're some for-profit museum, or have a large endowment. We do rely heavily on ticket sales. We operate 7 days a week, um, 300. I think we're only closed 4 days of the year. And sort of tied to that, so being a nonprofit and being a mission-driven organization, um, you know, ticket purchase is just r- regular visitors, and the ticket you purchase, you're becoming a supporter of the work that we do as a museum, particularly our K through 12 programs. And that's something that educators state at the end of tours. We're really thankful. We know there's all sorts of reasons that visitors come here to enjoy this museum, but that they're sort of contributing to helping us serve the 30,000 plus students and teachers that come through our doors physically, or as Maeve shared, virtually. It makes a big difference. So we like to address that misconception, kind of tied to what Maeve's sharing on the visitor side. Yeah, I mean, there's this misconception like, oh, you've come once. You can check Tenement Museum off your list. We've got 8 building tours, 3 walking tours, 12 families, as we mentioned. This span of history that, yeah, one tour, we're just scratching the surface. So, encouraging visitors, and we want to. We're not a one and done museum. We want to be able to continue the conversation with you. Hope you come back for other tours because of the range of educators. You could even take the same tour twice and get different facets, nuances, themes from our tours. And then, sort of lastly, I don't think, some people do know, but we want to share out those that don't. We offer a great array of public programming. The scholars that Maeve mentioned and those that we work with often, there's a lot of contemporary issues. We want to keep the conversation going around how does our past inform our present, and how do we wrestle with our present in light of the past? So, most of them are virtual, and pretty much all of them are free. So, just as a way to connect with those who can't physically come here, some people feel like, well, one day I'll get to the Tenement Museum when I visit New York City for that dream trip. And you can come now. You can engage in these conversations, be part of our family and community in conversation, whether it's, current issues, challenges around immigration, politics, points of U.S. history. So yeah, we want to make people know that there are more ways to join us, and particularly virtually throughout the year. Our public program is a great way to do it.
Thank you.
That's great. Speaking of resources and things that you've been making for teachers, can you show us a little bit more of your website? And if I was a classroom teacher trying to plan my curriculum for next academic year, where would be a good place to start for some, whether it be resources or just fully created activities? I'd love to see more.
All right, so welcome. This is our website here. And up at the top, there is a section for K-12. And this is the section that I recommend that you go to first if you are an educator. You'll see here is our Summer Teacher Institute. So it's called Under One Roof, Teaching Immigrant and Black History Through the New York City Tenements. And with that, we're really talking again about how are we teaching all of these different histories, all of the complexity of America intersectionally? How are we teaching them all together? So that is one option there. In terms of visits, you can come in person and again virtually. And bringing us into the classroom is definitely a way for you to, take a you book us and we come into your classroom virtually. So it gives you some time to sit back a little bit and we can really bring the experience to you and your students wherever you are located. If you're looking for resources that are plug and play or activities or things like that. When you go to the teacher section here, we have a section on lesson plans. And so this is where you can come in, you can filter by grade level, you can filter by the type of activity or resource that it is, and then you can dive into these different pieces. So for example, here's a crossword, whereas over here, this is an exploration of a primary resource with a 1910 census. Here's an upper elementary lesson exploring push and pull factors. We have another on defining immigration and migration, investigating a 1914 report card. I'll go in here to this one, examining a factory inspection report. Again, the work that we do it's so important for students to understand. And I'm sure everyone listening agrees, but it's so important for students to understand where history comes from because history, as we study it, is not just everything that happened. History is all the decisions that people have made about what gets remembered, who gets to tell the story, and who has actually looked through the research, who has looked through the libraries, who has looked through the artifacts, who has talked to the people who lived the experiences, who's written it down, what they've chosen to written down. And all of that means that our students can also discover history because they can find things that no one else can, or that they can put two different resources together. So A lot of our resources are about deep dives into individual primary sources to show how much information you can take out of them. So this one here is we've retyped it, of course, but it is a report of factory inspectors. And we've highlighted one of the individuals from the family, one of the families from our tenement. And so the putting this together with the family story allows you to, again, go back and forth between, okay, here's this theme of industrialization and factory work, but what is that actually looking like for a family? And how is Henry making choices about how to support his family when he's thinking about factory work? And how does the factory work there? How is that different than working within a home? Factories that are within a home versus factories that are outside of a home. This is a shift that's happening at this period. So we have lots of resources like that to look through. There's another really exciting project that we have that I'd love to talk about. And this is something that teachers and educators across the country already take part in. And this is our project, Your Story, Our Story. This is a nationwide storytelling and community collecting experience. And what it is we've offered a space in a website here, which I'll come to. So Your Story, Our Story is it's a website that we run, but it is really a collection of everyone's stories. And right now we have gathered stories and people continue to upload new stories all the time. And it's anyone who visits the Tenement Museum and wants to upload a story can do so, but we also work with a lot of teachers around the country, as I said, who do this as a class exercise. And as an educator, you can contact us and we can actually help you set up a sort of a page within a page so that all of your students' stories can be together and that's a link that you can send out to share with parents, for example, or share with school administration. And each of these stories is this like microcosm, but puts all together, you can really see the diversity and complexity and beauty of who is America right now. So it is searchable. I'll share that one of my favorite things to search for is the word bread because everyone has bread. Every single culture ever has some form of bread. And so I love searching for this and just seeing what comes up. And I'll just slow scroll. You can see all these different dishes that people have been uploading, and, I'm curious. Now I wanna know about the matzo man over here. I wanna dive into one of these objects and stories here, and this is one that was submitted by a student, Naima from Roosevelt High School. So this is a student who's at a school that we worked with this year, and this is the 250 words, because that's the maximum limit. That's 250 words that she wrote, and she also recorded herself reading her own story. So I'd love to take a minute so that she can share her story.
Hi, my name is Naiva, and today I'll be talking about my second object. My second object is called the sabayad, a Somali flatbread that carries the weight of history in its thin, golden layers. Sabayad comes from Somalia, where it is cooked on wide metal pans and shared during mornings, celebrations, and quiet family meals. Long before I learned about the object, it was made by women using simple ingredients: flour, water, oil, and patience passed down through generations. When my grandma moved to the United States, she brought this recipe with her, not in a suitcase, but in her memory. The smells followed her. In our American kitchen, the sense of sizzling dough still traveled through the house like a familiar voice the h- calling everyone in the house all together. The pan hissed as the bread cooked, sounding almost like the ocean she once lived near. Her hands knew the movements by heart. She rolled the dough thin and laid it on the pan, where it bubbled and turned golden, soft yet crispy. When I tasted it, it felt warm and comforting, like being wrapped in a story older than me. My grandma once said, "Cunaha wanaha, wanaha cunihisa wa caloosheeda," meaning a way to a person's heart is through their stomach. Through Sabayat, Somali traveled across oceans and borders into our home. This object teaches me that culture does not disappear, it adapts, survives, and lives on through what we make and share. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing that. That was so sweet. And what a cool archive of just experience and things that students could share with their teacher and other students. That's really cool. All right, moving on to some professional learning questions we have for you. If we're interested in learning more about either the Tenement Museum or American immigration generally, are there any books or documentaries that either your organization or you personally would suggest teachers could read to better understand the subjects that you highlight at the Tenement Museum?
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, I mean, first off, we're here to help. If there's a specific area of interest that you're not finding on, website that may have suggested our resources online or our YouTube channel that has the wealth of all of these public programs that we've been talking about, we're happy to direct you. But that's a great place to start is just searching if there's a particular area of focus, time period, some aspect of US history. It's all searchable. So you'd be able to find, hopefully, any sort of resource, curriculum, video that we currently have online. We do, I mean, the tenement story is in published form. So there's a book I mean, certainly last year, the teachers coming in, they loved our bookstore. Generally, people do. It's so wonderfully curated, connected a number of books related to our tours. And um, Mary Kate, who oversees the bookstore, they're very, very intentional about helping to point you to whatever your area of interest is. So, something actually that a lot of people don't know of is that you don't have to come here physically to enjoy our bookstore. It is available online. So, that's another, I think, great resource for teachers. Yeah, some of our books we publish ourselves to make sure that they're available or they're limited run. Some can be on the pricier side, but I think that in itself is a great resource for both popular works like Clint Smith's "How the Word Is Passed" is a favorite of ours, as well as the "Privilege of Family" by Kendra
Yeah, The
Fields.
Privilege of Family History by Kendra Fields, which is a really incredible that's not so much about, like, immigration history, but I think that what is really important about that book, as well as Clint Smith's book, as Stephen said, is that the both of those books are examinations into how we remember what we remember, how we remember history, and how we interpret it, and how history is passed down through oral history, through family connections, or how history is lost or obscured and how it can be revived. So I think that both of those books really get to that sense. And then, as Stephen said, our bookshop has category upon category of very specific immigration, either by time period or by country of origin. Lots of memoirs as well, which is another way to engage your students. If you have an excerpt of a memoir about an experience in that lived experience of immigration and migration as well.
Yeah. No, I appreciate Maeve just specifically around Kenda and Clint's work. I mean, no, these are recommended. These are books that also inspire us. I mean, I know we all need to get refreshed and be re-inspired as learners ourselves and lovers of history. So those are good reads specifically for teachers who are just, yeah, looking to be reinvigorated. And I think will be helpful in teaching, maybe not necessarily, uh, overtly, but certainly internally are great, great inspirational books for the very work that they're doing in the classroom.
Let me finish up with this. I'll do a quick hit with both of you here. And we've always thought this question is really interesting, some of the responses we've had here. Stephen, I'm going to start with you. When working at the museum, is there a favorite artifact, document, or story that you've had has just kind of resonated with you since you've been working there?
So I do one tour. It's 3A. It's the Schneider's family. It focuses on the lowest level of our tenement building, the commercial spaces. We start in Schneider's locale, which was a saloon run by a German immigrant couple on between the 1860s and 1880s. And I do something a little different. One of the primary sources is the invitation message that John Schneider publishes in the New Yorker Stadtzeitung in 1864, really to invite the community in for the opening of their locale. And what I love about it is I read it to visitors outside the locale, and as a way to personalize the invitation, but also to endow them as first time visitors to the space, and getting them in the mindset of thinking about, whenever you've been new somewhere, walk around the space and pay attention to what makes you feel welcome,
Mm.
what catches your eye, and maybe most importantly, what makes you want to stay. And it's just such a wonderful you just see, like, it totally changes, and as Maeve shared, like, the magic of these spaces that we get to invite them into the very recreated locale in the space, that first time visitors came into is special. So I like that primary source.
That's really interesting. That's really cool. I'm glad you do that. Maeve, same question to you. Something that stands out?
Huh. So I'll also talk about an object or series of documents really that are on the tour that I give here, which is about a family that is a Black American family from the in 1850s, 1860s. We interpret their life really in that era, and then 1870 is the year that we've set the apartment that we've recreated the tenement space that they lived in, and we have this. We have a piece of the program we do is we take visitors into a different space, one of the preserved spaces, but not reinterpreted spaces of the museum, and we have a series of documents that we can show. And my favorite documents are these series of advertisements from the Black press. So the Black press are Black-owned, Black-published newspapers that thrive in New York City for a very short but intensive time. So after slavery is abolished in New York City, or in New York State in 1827, there is this thriving publishing industry, and we collectively know it now as the Black press. And these newspapers allow you to really dive in and see what is going on in the community that this family is living in. So Rachel and Joseph Moore, the family that we focus on, they're living in what is called the Eighth Ward, which is a lower income neighborhood in New York City at the time. And it is where today Soho is actually in New York City in lower Manhattan. And their neighborhood is a very mixed neighborhood. It is a lot of African Americans, and then it's also a lot of Irish immigrants, as well as immigrants from other countries as well, but predominantly Irish and Black. And you can really see in the newspapers the daily life that's happening. And so there's ads for employment, for example, and saying how, come to me. There's this wonderful Madam Tillman's employment agency, and she's saying, come here and here's how much you could get for these jobs. Like, this is the where to come. And then there's also a woman who is putting up an advertisement because she's giving music lessons, and she's saying, come to my house and I'll give you Spanish guitar and singing lessons. And another Black woman who is opening up an ice cream saloon out of her apartment, which is just a few blocks away from where Rachel and Joseph live. So I think about maybe them going to go get some ice cream. And these sources are happening at the same time as the Civil War. And so what I love is being able to really show that day-to-day life that is happening alongside the things that the like touch points that we usually teach about or think about, and to show that all of that can be happening at the same time, and all of that is happening at the same time, just like now.
That is so cool to hear, and I'm excited to not only visit but further explore your website after we're done here. But thank you so much, Stephen and May, for joining us today and talking a little bit more about your really cool museum. If teachers are interested in learning more, it sounds like they should subscribe to your newsletter, go to your website. Do you recommend, can they email you directly? We'll put all this stuff in the notes of the show, but who's the best person to email if we have specific questions about lessons or anything like that?
Yeah, we have an email specifically for teachers. So it is teachers@tenement.org.
Perfect.
That goes to quite a number of us. Me and my team, we all are on that email. So if you have a specific question, that's the place to go. But yes, we definitely recommend signing up for our e-newsletter. As you started off at the top, we are a fairly small team. And so getting the word out is really a grassroots effort on our part. And so what we're doing may not reach you, but if you sign up for our newsletter, you will be the first to hear when our Teacher Institute, the application's open for next summer. You will be the first to hear when really exciting new books are coming to our bookshelf, and also when we are doing public talks and free virtual events with scholars that you can join from wherever you are.
Thanks for tuning in to Social Studies Teachers Have Issues, and we hope to see you next time. We hope today's episode sparked new ideas and gave you practical tools to bring history and civics to life in your classroom. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe, share with your fellow educators, and connect with us online for more resources and upcoming episodes. Together, we're building a stronger community of teachers and shaping the future of education one resource at a time. Until next time, keep teaching boldly and stay curious.